Hey everyone, welcome to your deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at Primal Leadership, Unleashing the Power of Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, Richard Boyatzis, and Annie McKee. And this is a book, I think, if you are at all interested in leadership, personal growth, just kind of understanding people better.
Yes.
This book is really insightful.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a classic. And it challenges a lot of assumptions too, right? Like, is being nice
Oh, yeah.
the same thing as being a good leader?
Right. I think I have some assumptions that are going to be challenged in this deep dive for sure.
I think so. So one of the big things that this book really brought to the forefront and popularized was this idea of emotional intelligence, or EI. And so they define that as the ability to recognize and understand emotions in yourself and in other people, and then to use that awareness to manage your behavior and relationships effectively.
So it's not just about being like touchy-feely. It's about strategy.
Well, it's using emotions in a strategic way. Right. It's not just being like, oh, I feel sad. It's like,
what do I do with this?
what do I do with this? How can I use this information to my advantage? How can I use it to be a better leader?
Okay. So I think some people might hear like emotions and leadership and be like, well, shouldn't it just be about like the strategy and making the tough calls?
Right. The hard
Where do feelings fit in?
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Well, it's interesting because I think the traditional view of leadership does focus more on those kind of rational aspects.
Yeah.
But the reality is that leaders set the tone for their entire team.
Okay.
And so if you have a leader that is stressed out, constantly reacting, it creates this tense and unproductive environment. Right. But if you have a leader who is more self-aware, composed, and empathetic, it can completely transform how the team operates.
So you're saying a leader's emotions really have this ripple effect?
Yes.
That if they're not in control of their own emotions, it can sabotage the whole team.
Yeah. I think of it like a pebble in a pond.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those ripples just go out and they affect everybody.
Wow. And so then I'm assuming this book goes into how you can actually develop that emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most encouraging things about emotional intelligence is that it's not something you're just born with. It's something you can cultivate, something you can learn over time. And so they lay out 4 key components of emotional intelligence.
Okay. Love a good framework.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first one is self-awareness. And this is all about knowing your own emotions, your strengths, your weaknesses, and how you come across to other people.
So it's like having a really strong understanding of how you are feeling and how those feelings might be impacting the people around you.
Absolutely. And then there's self-management, which I think is really where that strategic piece comes in. And this is about controlling those impulses, right?
Yeah.
So choosing how you react. It's not suppressing emotions. It's not being like, oh, I'm not going to feel that. But it's about not letting them hijack your behavior.
So you're saying self-awareness is step 1. And then step 2 is
self-management, You got to be able to manage those emotions once you know what they are. And then the next 2 components kind of shift the focus outward towards other people. So the third one is social awareness. And this is all about tuning into the emotions of others. Understanding their perspectives, being empathetic. So think about a time where you might have completely misread someone's mood at work. How could a little bit more social awareness have helped you in that situation?
I'm thinking back to a couple of awkward interactions where I really misread the room.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we've all been there,
Definitely.
And so, you know, that's a key component of emotional intelligence, is being able to kind of read those social cues.
Okay, so we've got self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. What is the final piece?
Okay, so the fourth component is relationship management. And this is all about taking all those other skills, the self-awareness, the self-management, the social awareness, and using them to build healthy, strong relationships. And to guide your team effectively.
So we've got these 4 pillars of EI. But I'm curious, does the book talk about different leadership styles?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I can imagine that a leader's EI might influence how they approach their role.
And they make this fascinating connection between leadership styles and the emotions that they evoke in a team.
Okay.
Right? So, for example, an authoritative leader might create a very structured and efficient environment.
Okay.
But it could also lead to team members feeling micromanaged or stifled.
Right.
On the other hand, a more collaborative leader might foster a lot of creativity and engagement, but it could also lead to less decisiveness or direction.
So each leadership style has its own emotional fingerprint almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they point out that certain styles are going to be more effective than others depending on the situation.
Okay.
So, for example, think about a crisis situation. What kind of leadership style do you think would be most helpful in that scenario?
I would imagine a leader who's very decisive and able to give clear directions.
Yes.
Even if it means maybe being a bit more authoritative.
Exactly.
In that moment.
Right.
But then maybe during a brainstorming session, you want someone who's more democratic. Right.
Yes, more collaborative.
Yeah.
More open.
Yeah. And so does this book advocate for like a one-size-fits-all approach?
It does not.
Not at all.
In fact, they argue against it.
Okay.
They say that the best leaders are the ones who can adapt their style to fit the situation.
Interesting.
And the people involved. And they call this being a resonant leader.
Okay.
And it requires a high level of emotional intelligence.
So it's not just about being stuck in one mode. It's about being able to adjust based on who you're working with.
Yes. That's fascinating. And I think especially in today's world where things are changing so rapidly, that adaptability is more valuable than ever.
Right.
You know, it's really all about being aware of that emotional landscape and responding in a way that creates a positive and productive environment.
That's so interesting. I'm already thinking about how I can apply some of this stuff.
Absolutely.
So we've kind of laid the groundwork for understanding EI and how it relates to leadership. But I think now I'm curious to get into the practical stuff.
Yes.
Like, what can our listener actually do to become more emotionally intelligent?
Absolutely.
So let's
dive into that.
Let's dive into that after a quick break.
Sounds good.
Okay. So we've talked about the what and the why of emotional intelligence, but now let's get into the how.
Yeah.
What are some concrete things our listener can do to actually become more emotionally intelligent?
Well, remember those 4 components of EI we discussed: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. The book actually offers some really practical tips for strengthening each of those areas.
Okay, let's start with self-awareness. It sounds like that's really the foundation for all the other components. But how do you actually get better at recognizing your own emotions?
Well, one of the things that they emphasize in the book is creating space for reflection. So they talk about things like journaling and mindfulness to help you kind of become more attuned to your inner world.
Journaling is something I've always meant to try, but I'll be honest, the idea of like sitting down and writing about my feelings just feels a little daunting.
Yeah, it can be.
What's the book's take on that?
I mean, they acknowledge that it can feel a little awkward at first, especially if you're not used to kind of expressing your emotions in writing.
Right.
But the point isn't to write some kind of masterpiece or anything. It's really just to create a space where you can observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Even just a few minutes each day can make a big difference.
So it's about building that muscle of self-reflection.
Exactly.
Okay. What about mindfulness? I feel like I've heard that word thrown around a lot lately, but I'm not always sure what it actually means in a practical sense.
Yeah, it's basically about paying attention to the present moment without getting carried away by thoughts about the past or worries about the future.
Okay.
And the book gives this great example of how even a few minutes of mindful breathing can help you regulate your emotions and make better decisions, especially when you're feeling stressed.
Okay.
And they actually cite a study of CEOs who made kind of these rash decisions after receiving bad news.
Oh, interesting.
And the CEOs who practiced mindfulness, even for short periods, they were less likely to overreact and their companies actually performed better.
Wow. So there's actually evidence that mindfulness can improve leadership skills.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That's pretty compelling. Okay. Let's move on to self-management. Any tips for getting better at handling those tricky emotions, especially in high-pressure situations?
Well, one of the key strategies they highlight is the importance of reframing negative thoughts.
Okay.
It's about challenging those automatic negative thoughts that can pop up when we're stressed or facing a challenge.
Oh, I know those thoughts all too well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not good enough. I'm going to mess this up. They can really spiral out of control.
And the book encourages us to kind of pause and question those thoughts, right? Ask yourself, is this thought really true?
Right.
Is there another way to look at this situation?
So instead of just accepting those negative thoughts as facts, you challenge them and look for a more balanced perspective.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. What about social awareness? That seems like a really crucial skill for building strong relationships.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the most powerful tools for increasing social awareness is simply asking questions and truly listening to the answers.
Yeah.
It's about putting aside your own assumptions and genuinely trying to see the world through another person's eyes.
It sounds so simple, but I imagine it's harder than it seems. It's easy to get caught up in our own heads and forget to really tune in to what others are feeling and thinking.
Absolutely. It takes conscious effort, especially if you're in a leadership role where you're used to kind of giving directions.
Right.
But the book really emphasizes that asking questions isn't a sign of weakness.
No.
It actually shows that you value other people's perspectives and that you're willing to learn from them.
Yeah, okay. So we've covered self-awareness, self-management, social awareness. Now, let's talk about that final component, relationship management. Any practical advice for improving our communication and building stronger connections with others?
One technique they suggest is to focus on giving feedback that's both honest and constructive. It's about finding that balance between being direct about areas for improvement while also acknowledging and appreciating someone's strength.
That makes sense. Nobody wants to feel like they're constantly being criticized.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we all need feedback to grow. How does the book suggest we strike that balance?
Well, they highlight the importance of focusing on specific behaviors rather than making generalizations about a person's character.
Okay.
So instead of saying, you're always late, you might say, I noticed that you were late to the last 3 meetings. Is there anything going on that's making it difficult for you to be on time?
So it's about addressing the behavior in a way that's respectful and solution-oriented.
Exactly.
I can see how that would be much more effective than just simply pointing out the problem.
Absolutely. And they also stress the importance of active listening.
Okay.
So not just hearing the words someone is saying, but really paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language, and the emotions behind their words.
It's about picking up on those subtle cues
that
often reveal more than words alone.
Yes.
I'm starting to realize that emotional intelligence is really a whole body experience. It's not just about what's happening in our heads.
Yeah.
It's about paying attention to all those nonverbal signals as well. This is all so insightful. But I have to admit, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. Developing all these skills sounds like a lot of work. Are there any common roadblocks we should be aware of? What if we stumble along the way?
You're not alone in feeling that way. And the authors acknowledge that applying emotional intelligence, especially in leadership roles, isn't always easy. And they do address some of the most common challenges that we might face.
Okay, so what are some of those challenges? And how can we overcome them? What does the book recommend?
Well, one of the biggest obstacles is stress.
Okay.
Leaders are often under immense pressure.
Right.
And when those stress levels get too high, it can really hijack our emotional intelligence and lead to poor decisions.
I can definitely relate to that.
Right.
When I'm stressed, I tend to get more irritable and short-tempered. Not exactly leadership material.
Right.
So what's the antidote? How can we manage stress in a way that allows us to stay emotionally intelligent?
Well, the book emphasizes that stress management is essential for leaders.
Okay.
And they don't just offer vague advice like, take a vacation. They actually delve into specific techniques that have been proven to reduce stress and improve emotional regulation.
Okay.
Things like mindfulness practices, regular exercise, getting enough sleep, building a strong support network.
All the things we know we should be doing,
Yes.
but sometimes struggle to prioritize.
Exactly. But they make a very compelling case for why these things are so crucial, especially for leaders. When you're managing your stress effectively, you're better able to think clearly, make sound decisions, and respond to challenges in a calm and composed manner.
Right. What about conflict? I mean, it's inevitable in any workplace.
Yeah.
How does the book suggest we approach conflict through an emotionally intelligent lens. I'm guessing it's not about avoiding it altogether.
You're right. The book actually encourages us to embrace conflict as an opportunity for growth and understanding. And they recommend that leaders try to act as empathetic mediators, acknowledging and validating the emotions of all parties involved.
So instead of trying to shut down the conflict or impose a solution, you kind of lean into it with curiosity and compassion.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for open dialogue where everyone feels heard and respected. And they offer some really practical tips for how to do that. For example, they talk about the importance of using I statements to express your own feelings and needs without blaming or attacking others.
So instead of saying, you're always making me feel, you would say something like, when this happens, I feel.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift in language, but it can make a big difference in how the other person receives your message.
Right. Okay. We've talked about managing stress and navigating conflict. Are there any other common roadblocks to applying EI that the book addresses?
One thing they highlight is the importance of recognizing our own biases and blind spots. We all have them, and they can sometimes prevent us from seeing situations clearly and responding in an emotionally intelligent way.
So it's about developing that self-awareness to recognize when our own preconceived notions might be clouding our judgment.
Precisely. And the book suggests that one way to do this is to actively seek out feedback from others, especially people who have different perspectives than our own. It can be uncomfortable to hear feedback that challenges our assumptions. But it's essential for growth.
I'm realizing that this whole journey of developing emotional intelligence is really about embracing discomfort. It's about stepping outside of our comfort zones and being willing to learn and grow, even when it's challenging.
You've hit the nail on the head. And the book makes a strong case for why that discomfort is worthwhile. Because ultimately, emotional intelligence isn't just about becoming a better leader. It's about becoming a better human.
This has been such an incredible deep dive. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of all the wisdom contained in primal leadership. But I'm already starting to see how these ideas can transform the way we lead and interact with the world. What about you? What's resonated most with you from this exploration of emotional intelligence?
For me, it's just realizing that emotional intelligence isn't some fluffy concept. You know, it's actually a really powerful tool
for success in both our professional and personal lives.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me was just how much emphasis they put on that ripple effect of a leader's emotions. You know, the point that a leader's mood and behavior can really impact the entire team.
Like that old saying, emotions are contagious.
Yes, exactly.
But in a leadership context, it
takes on a whole new meaning.
Yes, so much more weight.
You know, if a leader is anxious and reactive, it creates that negativity throughout the team. But if they're calm and confident and optimistic, it can really inspire and motivate everyone around them.
So it's not just about managing our own emotions, it's about understanding the impact they have on others.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're in a leadership position. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the 4 components of EI. We've talked about leadership styles and how they play into it. And we've given some practical tips for developing these skills. But what does it all mean for our listener? What's one small step they could take today to become more emotionally intelligent in their interactions?
You know, I think the most important thing is just to start paying closer attention to your own emotions. Notice what triggers you, how you react in different situations, and how your emotions are impacting your behavior and the people around you. You know, become a detective of your own inner world.
And once you have that awareness, then you can start to make conscious choices about how you respond.
Exactly.
So it's moving from that place of reactivity to a place of intentionality. I love that.
And remember, developing emotional intelligence, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you stumble or fall back into old patterns. But be patient with yourself. And just keep practicing.
It's so empowering to realize that we have the power to choose how we respond rather than letting our emotions control us. That's a really beautiful thought. So as you continue to cultivate your emotional intelligence, you'll find that it becomes more effortless.
It does.
It becomes a part of who you are.
Yes.
Both as a leader and as
A better human.
Yeah. What an eye-opening conversation. I feel like we've only just started to explore the wisdom in this book.
Yeah, there's so much more.
But I'm already starting to see how these ideas can really transform the way we lead and interact with the world.
I agree.
And to our listeners out there, we highly recommend checking out Primal Leadership, Unleashing the Power of Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, Richard Boyatzis, and Annie McKee. It's a book that can really change.
It can change your life.
The way you lead and interact with the world.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of emotional intelligence, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Book Talks Wisdom.
Yes.
So you can get notified about our latest book decodes.
We are always on the lookout for great books that can help you grow and learn.
Yes, absolutely.
And leave us a comment letting us know what books you'd like to see us discuss and decode in future episodes.
Yes, we love to hear from you.
We love hearing from you. Until next time.
Keep seeking wisdom in the pages you turn.